If you're in South Africa, you've probably received a lot of calls, texts, and emails in the last couple of weeks, all talking about this thing called POPI or POPIA, right? What is it about? What do businesses have to do? What do consumers have to do? What is all of this about? That's what we're talking about today. Hey, what up? It's your boy MobbJustice back again with another video, and for today we are talking about POPI, which is a new set of data protection laws in South Africa. I'm not a lawyer, but this was a video that was actually requested because people have been receiving all of these calls, text messages, etc. Companies getting compliant and want to know what's actually going on the ground. So I hope that we're going to be getting a bit of an overview of what POPI is. I will link some resources in the description that actually give comprehensive breakdowns of what the act is, what the act is not about. But for this video, we're hoping to just talk at a high level about what the impact will be on consumers, on businesses, as well as how all of this will be enforced. As always, this video is brought to you by the team over at Lion Media. Head on over to check out some of the crispiest photo, video, and audio content. That's www.lionmedia.com. Head on over, check it out, and just see what the team can do for you. In essence, POPI is a new set of data protection laws in South Africa. POPI itself actually stands for the Protection of Personal Information Act. That's why some people call it the POPI Act and others call it POPIA. It came into effect on the 1st of July 2020. That was last year. But the reason why all the calls and texts and emails have been flying around now is because it actually came into effect in terms of enforcement from the 1st of July 2021. So basically it came in last year, but companies, businesses, and other actors in the economy were given a year to become compliant with the laws, and then now they're going to be enforcing it. The reason why this is important is because of an increasing trend towards data protection around the world. People are doing more things online, people are transacting online, and more data is being collected about people. And regulators around the world, especially the European Union, with their general data protection regulation, otherwise known as GDPR, have really taken on the task of protecting people. And POPI is actually modeled against GDPR, which has sort of become the gold standard when it comes to data protection laws around the world. For today, we want to look at a couple of pieces, starting off with the consumer side. And there's two key things that are happening. The first one is that POPI gives greater protections to consumers around their data. That is the whole purpose of this particular piece of legislation. We've said in previous videos that the way that we transact online, especially when we had all those videos around WhatsApp's privacy policy and all of that stuff, that when you're transacting online and services are free, you are usually the service, especially your data. And regulators around the world are looking at ways of actually giving more power to consumers. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that POPI will actually allow consumers to have greater knowledge of what's actually happening with the data that's being collected. If you arrive at a building, you sign forms, your name, registration number, ID, cell phone number, all of that stuff, what's actually happening to that data. And this new act actually gives consumers that ability to actually ask businesses and other players, what are you doing with my data? So when it comes to businesses and organizations, there's two big things that need to be considered. The first one is the fact that for businesses, the big cost when it comes to POPI is compliance. That is the big thing here. What are you as an organization or as a business doing to make sure that you're safeguarding the information that you're collecting that actually comes from customers, suppliers, all of that stuff? There's been a lot of data breaches of late, and this is what's actually happening. This is what people are doing, what lawmakers have done to try and ease some of these issues. So compliance is the big piece, and as I said, companies had a year to do that. Part of the compliance activity is that companies have had to go out and identify what personal information they collect, analyze their operations to identify digital security risks, redo direct marketing communication, as well as provide compliance training and policies to staff, review their IT security and physical security policies, as well as to amend contracts that include POPI compliance clauses. And compliance is not a destination, because there's no certificate that says that a company or an organization is necessarily POPI compliant, but rather that they have measures in place. And with the changing face of technology, it means that those measures constantly need to be changing, which is why POPI compliance is likely going to continue being a journey rather than a place that businesses get to. And from a legal point of view, I've actually read a number of instances where lawyers actually say that the most important thing, if you do find yourself on the wrong side of the information regulator, which actually looks after the enforcement, you need to prove that you've taken steps to actually be compliant with the laws. The second piece is that the act puts an onus on executives in companies, right? Because by default, it says that there must be one person who is in charge of the data that is collected by a company or an organization. By default, that's either the head or the CEO of that company. If not, then a special information officer actually has to be appointed to actually take on that responsibility. So we've talked about the consumer side, we've talked about the business side, but one of the key pieces going forward, at least, is going to be enforcement, right? How seriously or how well will government bodies, state institutions be able to actually enforce the act, to make sure that people pay, to make sure that people comply with the law? Now, in South Africa, the information regulator is in charge of the enforcement of POPI, and the information regulator can actually assess or investigate a company's compliance with POPI when there has been a complaint by a customer or a consumer whose data was collected and misused, for example. So you'll think of an instance like a data breach. The information regulator has already acted in a number of cases where there have been data breaches in the last year or two. So that role is already there. And for now, the information regulator seems to really be serious about its role in South Africa, because earlier this year, once again coming back to the WhatsApp example, the information regulator was very firm against what Facebook was doing, because there's certain concessions in the enforcement of their privacy policy that they had given to European users that they hadn't given to users in South Africa and the rest of the continent. And seeing as it is that POPI is modeled after GDPR, they felt that it was unfair, and they actually wrote a very strongly worded press statement at the time. And I'm sure that the engagements behind the scene must have been quite tense. Despite the fact that legislation is usually looked at with a bit of a side eye, there is value that comes from being POPI compliant, or at least, trying by all means to comply with the law, because it means that as a business, at least, you actually work to protect your own business and the data that's coming into your business. But at the same time, it can help you to actually have a better reputation, because usually when there's data breaches in organizations and it comes out, it causes reputational damage on the side of consumers. So those are all things to think about, that it might be a bit expensive to comply with the law, but over time it's probably more beneficial than anything else. When it comes to the business consideration considerations and some of the trends, there's three that I want to highlight when it comes to all of this privacy protection stuff. The first one is the fact that we are living in a world, we said it in our WhatsApp video earlier this year, where consumers are increasingly aware of what's happening with their data, and they want to know what's happening with their data, and they want to interact with businesses, organizations, services, platforms that are going to protect their data and not exploit it. So there's that to consider. The second piece is the fact that with that knowledge in mind, if you think about the Apple thing that we spoke about earlier this year, where they give prompts to their users about, who's collecting data on you, who's not, right? Is how is this going to change internet business models? Because we're seeing more and more of these data protection laws being enacted around the world. And we've always said, if it's free, you are the product, your data, all of that. But if there's greater protections in place, right, does that not hinder the data collecting ability of companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, whoever all of those players are? How is that going to affect the business models that have traditionally been in place online? Perhaps most important in this debate, just given current trends, is the fact that cyber threats are on the rise. Incidents of cyber attacks are on the rise, and the need for cyber security also needs to go up in tandem. And piece of that is greater data protections. When you listen to certain cybersecurity experts, they actually say that countries like South Africa are in the top 10 for incidents of cyber attacks, at least in the last 2 to 3 years. And part of the reason that's given there, not the whole reason, but part of it has been attributed to the fact that there haven't been strong enough protections in place. So if you have the protections, you have the legislative framework, it doesn't get rid of the attackers, but at least it deters some of these attackers, which is always a move in the right direction. Now, ultimately, I do think that awareness is on the rise. People know a little bit more about what data is being collected and why this stuff is dangerous, and they don't want to be followed. That is the reality we live in, and especially when you see more and more notifications about it, cookie notices, Apple's iOS notifications about apps following you, it makes people more aware. But whether or not that's going to be enough to really change consumer behavior, really we wait to see where that's gonna be. I don't think it's going to shift the needle as much. I think a little bit more needs to be done to get people, to generally as a society get us to a place where people act a bit more safe online and are a bit more aware. But in the same way that people tend not to read terms and conditions, it may be that we might get to a place where people will just see cookie notices or all of these notifications and just swipe yes, accept, and just continue with their lives because it's convenient. We're human beings, we get tired. There's a lot of things that we're dealing with on a daily basis, and for some, whether or not a company is collecting data about where you've been, what you're eating, etc., it might not be that deep for them. So that is a reality. Whilst at the same time, there will be a lot of people that will want more data protections. That is true, but on the whole, we just wait and see. So that's been it for this video. Thank you to everyone who was watching. You can let us know what you think of this. Have you received the emails? Have you accepted the prompts? What do you think of data protection? Do you take your data protection seriously? Let us know in the comments, engage with us, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.
This is Muffs Too Much, and you're watching MobbJustice TV. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter. We're there on YouTube. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe.